2, 1. What's up, y'all? You're listening to the My Aggie Nation podcast. I'm Alex Miller with the Eagle, joined always by Robert Cessna. Cease, here we are. It's game week, another season. What's kind of your impression of how things feel around this town heading into A&M's season opener against Notre Dame?
I touched on that the other day. I think it's close to when Alabama came here in 2013 with game day and that new change with Elko, putting Jimbo in a rearview mirror. I think each day it's gained a little bit. I think it's just a huge weekend, and I think it's really going to hit a lot of us come Friday night or when we wake up Saturday morning. It's game day. It's Notre Dame.
Well, let's preview the 2024 season. Cease, I think there's still a lot of question marks about this A&M team. Let's maybe first talking about some key players on each side of the ball. Who do you think is going to be a key player for A&M this season on the offensive side of the ball?
Well, you got to look at Wegman. I mean, it gets sometimes. Don't try to go ahead and look at somebody's booger in his nose, whatever. Just state the obvious. And if Wegman doesn't have a good year, you could say, well, Cessna, Henderson's great. The backups are great. Reed, yeah, but if Wegman doesn't have a big year, I don't see A&M having a big year. And, you could – it's amazing when you mention that, Alex. I think you could say the offensive line. I think you can say the wide receivers. And suddenly I do have a lot of question marks because until all three of those entities, quarterback, line, and wide receiver, do it, I've got questions.
I think for me, the guy I'm watching is Noah Thomas at wide receiver. Mike Elko alluded on Monday that, he thinks A&M's got a number one receiver. He didn't say who it was, though. But, I think if we're smart and we're putting the pieces of the puzzle together and reading the tea leaves right, I think we all know that they're expecting Noah Thomas to be that guy going into the season. You talk about the health issues with Connor Wegman. Noah Thomas has had his battles over the last couple years as well. And so, I think he's a guy that he's got the frame, he's got the skills, and they're really hoping that he can be that playmaker on offense that can get things going. I definitely am curious how the running back room shakes out too. Losing Owens, I think, is gonna show to be a pretty big deal, but Moss and Daniels have had good times, and it sounds like Smith is healthy right now for the most part, transferring in from Stanford. I'm also curious what this Colin Klein offense is actually going to look like. It sounds very innovative and new and foreign, but it sounds like A&M's kind of grasped what the concept is pretty early on.
Well, I got to laugh because I do get back to the offensive line because when you look last year, the running numbers were great if the line blocked, and if they didn't block, even Owens only averaged like 3.3 or whatever. In other words, if the line blocks, Daniels and Moss, to me, are more than adequate with, as you mentioned, a very innovative Klein offense based on what he's done. But if the offensive line has been like its last 2 years, then it doesn't matter. Will Wegman stay healthy? Not if the offensive line doesn't do their job. And the running backs, and it all goes back to is, I think the offensive line will be better just by adding their two transfers. And the fact is, these guys, Zune, Naboo, these guys we mentioned, it's time for them to step up. Forget about potential, and I know Zune was hurt and all that, but line's got to block.
How about on the defensive side?
Defensive side, I have a lot less questions, only because I know that defensive line is going to do the job. I mean, that defensive line is one of the best in the country, but you can say that about 8 teams in the SEC. So then it does get that back. Who is that second linebacker? And is the secondary really that good? Because, sometimes you look at A&M's numbers last year, the secondary was okay, but it's like that commercial. You're sure, is it okay? Can it take that next step? So I'm waiting for another linebacker and for that secondary to take the next step because I just can't get over that A&M can't make more turnovers. With that defensive line, I'm just still, even last year, how did they not have more turnovers?
Speaking of that, I think the guy that I'm really watching is Shamar Stewart. I think Nick Scorton has gotten a lot of the hype and the attention because of what he did at Purdue. He's the hometown kid coming back. But, Shamar Stewart talked about it when we talked with him in the preseason. Like, he was this close last year to having a much larger sack total than what he did. If he can find a way to get home to the quarterback a few more times, I mean, he can really be kind of an X factor off the edge. He's built differently than Nick Scorton too. Scorton's a really big guy that'll just bull rush you off the edge. Got a spin move. Stewart is, I'm not saying he's Myles Garrett. He's built more like Myles Garrett though, where you looked at Myles and I mean he's just ripped, right? The muscles just got out at you. He's real cut in the middle. That to me is more what Shamar Stewart's build is. And I'm curious what, playing across from a guy like Scorton can open up opportunities for him, because now they got to account for two guys versus just one.
Well, once again, you're right. When we look at the offensive line, if they've got to have 3 or 4 guys to keep 2 ends on, the tackles are going to get through. The tackles are going to make huge plays. So once again, A&M has the makings of a great defense just because the point of attack's great. I mean, there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be excited opponents that their offensive line held their own. They'll be excited if they hold their own against A&M, because then maybe you can exploit that other linebacker, or maybe exploit the secondary. But there's going to be a lot of good offensive lines that are going to lose to A&M's defensive line.
How about on special teams? What's kind of your read there?
I just chuckle when I think, okay, 105,000 people. If A&M goes 3 and out the first time they have the ball, they're going to have a guy White or somebody come out and punt for the first time in college football. And you see guys in the NFL making their first punt, and sometimes they'll shank it. They won't handle the snap ready. So now I'm talking about an 18 to 20-year-old kid, first snap, and maybe Notre Dame knows that too, so they come with an all-out block first time. And we've seen a lot of games over the years hinge at A&M on special teams because of a screw-up or something positive. So I think off the bat, I'm thinking if A&M can punt 5 or 6 times in this game and have all punts 40 yards or better with no hiccups, that would be great.
What's a game on this schedule that you think is the biggest game for A&M this season?
Well, you always got to go with Texas, and I'm laughing. I'm looking at the start and the end because nothing's bigger than Texas. I mean, we're sitting here 3 months away. We've waited, all of us, whether you're media, some fans, and I know some fans still aren't cool with it. I get it, but 13 years for this game to happen or whatever. So you can't underestimate A&M and Texas. And much like this week, that Texas game is just going to continue to build. It's going to get closer, and the prices are going to keep going up. I don't care if they're 4 wins or 5 wins. But Notre Dame, I mean, this is going to tell me so much about A&M. They're not playing McNeese State. If they're playing McNeese State right now, none of those questions matter. The offensive line wins. The other linebacker wins. The secondary wins. The punter is not really nervous. He could drop the ball and probably still get the ball off.
They may not even punt.
They might not even have to punt. Right. But Notre Dame, man, a lot of my questions are going to be answered.
I'm going to go a little off the wall on the most important game from my perspective. I'm going to say it's going to be at Florida week 3.
I was say that. I read your mind.
You read my mind. And it's not because I'm looking forward to going to the casino with you. But to me, here's why. I think Notre Dame, if A&M loses, they're not necessarily expected to win. I think A&M can win. Like, if they won the game, it wouldn't surprise me. But if they lost, it also wouldn't surprise me. Notre Dame is ranked in the top 10. A&M's 13 spots behind them, right? This is a first-year head coach coming in with a team that's coming off a 7-6 record. Florida's a big game because, okay, if you lose to Notre Dame, or even if you win, right, A&M's got to get a monkey off its back this year, and that's winning a road game, right? And that first road game is going to come quick. Florida's playing for its coach's job. Napier's on the hot seat. We all know that. That's a big storyline coming in the season for the Gators. And Florida's not an easy place to play. I mean, I think the last time A&M played there was kind of a similar situation. Florida was down as a program. It was only 3/4 the way full. You know, it was an ugly game. They wore those ugly gator skin uniforms. You remember that?
Kind of forgot that, but I do remember I did like going to the Swamp.
Yeah.
But I agree with you 100% because you lose that game, even if you beat Notre Dame, you're kind of like, you're back to being
takes the wind out of your sails.
You haven't won on the road again. Whereas if you lose to Notre Dame and then you beat Florida, you're jacked up. You won on the road. You're 1-0 in the SEC. You know, a lot of things going for you. And it's like that devil's advocate. If you wanted to pick one, they have to win. Really, it's Florida. But of course, you want to win your opener. You want to be greedy. You want to be 3-0 and number 10 in the nation.
3-0 versus 1-2 is going to have very different outlooks for the rest of the season, wouldn't you say?
And like I said, the good news is I'm going to get so many things answered. And I could honestly say I think playing Notre Dame will help them going to Florida because they will recognize some of their weaknesses. Because I don't think you want to go into Florida riding a 2-0 start against two nobodies because you haven't answered anything yet. And then, as you mentioned, the Swamp, they're trying to, some people remember they lost A&M last time. They got a win for Napier. Who knows, SEC today might be there for that. You never know. It's going to be a big game. Anytime you're in the SEC, they're big games.
Well, Cease, what is your preseason record prediction for how A&M's going to finish in 2024?
I'm going 8-4. We always do this and always have to laugh because injuries will play so much of a factor in their record or who they play. A&M's got a very favorable schedule, but I know that every time that I've ever said that A&M's got a favorable schedule, most times it wasn't a favor. They didn't take advantage of it. So history has shown that time and time again, and now more than ever. I did all the SEC previews. I mean, everybody's got like 30 new players. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal that there's so many unknowns. And unlike most years, 10 years ago, when you're bringing all these freshmen in, you go, maybe someone will be on special teams. 4 or 5 are going to be studs and play a lot, but not like now. I mean, I watched that game last week in Georgia Tech and Florida State, and every time they announced somebody, that guy, he came from Edinburgh, he came from nowhere. And suddenly he's helping Georgia Tech knock off a top 10 team. We're going to see that all across college football forever now because of the transfer portal.
Maybe I'm a little too optimistic. I do think A&M can.
12-0.
No, absolutely not. Here's the thing, though. I don't think there's a game on A&M's schedule that they can't win. I think they could win every game, but I know they're not. I have the Aggies going 9-3 though. With the way things set up, that you got your hardest games at home, you get Florida early. Auburn's kind of a wild card at the end of the season. I think Auburn's going to be the most improved team in the SEC by the end of the season. But I don't know, just the way things are shaping up, I can't see A&M's offensive line getting any worse than it was last year. I mean, never say never, but I mean, it was pretty bad. If Wegman can stay healthy, revamped offensive look, I think A&M's got the makings to have a good, but not a championship level season is kind of what I'm thinking. What do you think the ceiling for this team is, though? Well, if everything went right.
I think if a lot of things went right, they could go 10-2 because, like you said, there's too many variables that there's no way they're going to win all their games. I mean, just when you're in the SEC, you just don't go from 7-6 and be 11-1 or 12-0. It's just not going to happen. They got too many question marks, and the SEC's too good. And you got to go on the road, and then it'd be a nice problem for A&M to have. How do you handle being 5-0? How suddenly Arkansas jumps up and beats you, whatever. They're just not to the point yet that you can expect that team to really be good. But we know there's talent. We just mentioned that all the people they brought in, offensive line, secondary, they brought people in from the Big 12 that started 30, 40 games, some of them, that they're good. They're the blanket, whatever. They can do the job.
You like that nickname?
I love that nickname because if you get a cornerback that can lock down the other team's best receiver, to me, you're going to win one more game.
And A&M really hadn't had that the last few years.
Hadn't had that, but in the old days when they had the Mickens, they had the Kevin Smiths, they had people that could do that, and A&M hasn't had that. The Alabamas have, and other teams like that, Georgia's, and that's why they win. Ohio State's, and that's why I'm saying 8-4. I think there'll be a lot of good Saturdays. I think there'll be some frustrating Saturdays.
Well, Cease, anything else before we wrap this up?
I'm just glad they're playing Notre Dame. I'm glad they're playing a team that we're going to see a lot with, and I just like the feel around the team. When you bring in Bateman, you bring in Klein, Elko. It's not flashy. It's pretty meat and potatoes. I'm a meat and potatoes guy. Here we go. Don't blow smoke up my dress. Let's just go ahead and play football. And I think Elko's a little down to earth. Reminds me a lot of Mike Sherman. The coaches recently, since RC was so, how would you say, likable and just down there, well, how you doing? Just one of those guys. It's hard not to like Sherman, but he had too much pro in him. He just didn't make it back. I could still say he's probably the best O-line coach A&M ever had. But now you got Elko, and you could say he's one of the best defensive coordinators A&M ever had.
Well, I guess it's a good thing A&M's not playing Arkansas State this week. All right. Hey, that'll do it for this week's episode of the My Aggie Nation podcast. Be sure to check theeagle.com for all of our content leading up to Saturday's game. I feel bad for making that Arkansas State joke now.
No, it's actually good. I mean, well, Alex, I'll tell you, buddy, that's a good job.
We'll see you next week on the My Aggie Nation podcast.